Okay, in this video, I'm going to go over the headline on your screen here. Viral fossils in our DNA may help us fight infection. Endogenous retroviruses seem to protect cells from invaders. But before getting started, I have to issue a standard disclaimer here and recognize the fact that I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to these subject matters. For example, I had to look up what an endogenous retrovirus was immediately before I even read this article further. So that shows you where I am. I'm not even in the 101 class when it comes to this kind of thing. A PhD in any of the related disciplines that I will get into here would be able to embarrass me with their knowledge of these subjects compared to my own. However, the one thing that those PhDs don't have is potentially the correct context that we might be able to bring to the analysis here. And if those PhDs had the correct context, they might be able to solve the problem of certain viruses in a way that they are currently unable to. Because it's like anything else. If you're trying to solve a problem, but you don't know what the actual cause is, it's going to be very difficult to actually figure it out. You're going to try all kinds of different things and fail over and over again because you don't have that key piece of information that unlocks how you approach the problem correctly. And in this context, the key piece of context would be the view that viruses are actually nanotechnology. Viruses are a form of biological technology that were designed to do specific things to the body. And the PhDs are not told that. They're told a bunch of different ideas that speculate on how these things come about in a natural way in nature. Now, the first thing a scientist would come back with is, well, hey, how can you prove to me that a virus is nanotechnology? Well, of course, I cannot do that in any conventional way. First of all, I'm just repeating an idea that was put out there by someone much smarter than I, who was a medical doctor, and came to that conclusion based on his expertise in combination with an infusion of knowledge from that which created us. And I know I've lost the PhD there most likely, but stay with me and I'll flesh it out for you, and then you can make your decision on whether or not there may or may not be something to this. But as a thought experiment, if you go with me on this, if viruses are nanotechnology, meaning someone designed them, some intelligence much more advanced than us designed it to alter our biology, then a headline like viral fossils in our DNA may help us fight infection starts to take on a little more weight. Well, hold on a second. If that's true, then an endogenous retrovirus was designed to alter our evolution. And that gets into the videos that I did on this kind of subject matter previously. The first one here, Evolution and the Human Brain, where researchers were actually able to insert a human gene into marmoset brains and get them to grow in size, which is allegedly the same thing that transpired in our own evolution, where our brains grew a full pound in size out of nowhere, which was not evolutionarily beneficial to us because women started dying in childbirth due to the massive size of the heads that they were trying to push out. And then this ties into, is aging a disease? Evolution, B12, vitamin C, D, thymus, telomeres, and childbirth. Well, I just went into the childbirth part. But this ties into aging as well, as we will see going forward here. So I'm going to read this article, but I guess I should try to explain the difference between endogenous and exogenous retroviruses for the non-PhDs that might be listening to this, like myself, who had to go look it up. And essentially, as I understand it, the difference between the two is that an endogenous retrovirus infects the cells that are passed on genetically through the generations via reproduction, and the exogenous retroviruses are more along the lines of HIV or other types of viruses that are exchanged between two currently living human beings. And that's all I'm going to say on the matter, so as to not expose my ignorance further. Let's just start reading this article. You are up to 8% virus, at least as far as your genome is concerned. Up to 100,000 pieces of ancient viral DNA live among our genes, yet their function, if any, has long been unclear. A new study suggests that some of this foreign genetic material may boost our immune systems, even protecting us from other viruses. When a type of virus known as a retrovirus infects a cell, it converts its RNA into DNA, which can then become part of a human chromosome. Once in a while, retroviruses infect sperm and egg cells and become endogenous, meaning they are passed down from generation to generation. Endogenous retroviruses, or ERVs, are not able to produce new viruses, and because of that, scientists originally assumed that they were harmless genetic fossils. This is similar to the way that the scientists refer to that whole portion of our brain that we allegedly don't use. And they just say, oh yeah, that's just part of the brain we don't use. I guess we only use 10% or whatever they say. It's like, most likely we're using that for some aspect of our existence that you just don't quite understand. I mean, that part of the brain could be in another dimension communicating with things that our five senses can't even perceive. And the scientist in the third dimension says, well, hey, I don't know what they're doing with that part of the brain, but we can't explain it, certainly. Then again, I'm repeating something that I heard many, many years ago, so maybe they're more nuanced in their take of what that alleged area of the brain is doing now that they used to think didn't do anything. Again, exposing my ignorance here. Remember, I don't know what I'm talking about. Please keep that in mind. And really, this goes for any video that I put out. We must always remember this. Unless I explicitly state, hey, I'm an expert on this, and I can prove that to you, we must go to the default setting, which is, I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. Controversial studies have long suggested that certain cancers, like some lymphomas, result when ERVs interfere with normal gene function. But more recently, researchers have raised the possibility that these viruses can also be a good thing. ERVs, perhaps inherited millions of years ago, may affect genes important to placenta function and thus may improve our ability to carry a pregnancy. What's more, there is evidence that they play a role in the early human embryo, where they may help fight off infectious viruses. Now, this ties in directly to the video here that I did on the increase in brain size, where I was speculating on the possibility that some other intelligence altered life here and turned it into what we know as human beings, gave us its mind essentially, in a way that we became disconnected from the natural world here. And that evidence is all around us. I don't need to go any further on that front. But as I said in this video as well, it explains why we are viewed as cattle to them and the people who enforce its agenda. That's how you would view something that you created in that way. You'd say, look, man, I gave you life. Don't complain to me. Who are you to complain to me? Get away. Quiet now. But this ties into that because here we're starting to see evidence of these retroviruses impacting both the early human embryo and pregnancy. And in that way, you can see how if a virus is nanotechnology and these retroviruses, endogenous, passed down through the generations, are involved, well, you could very quickly alter something via that process simply by giving them certain viruses. And the process would naturally take care of itself via reproduction over and over again. Kind of in the way where our own scientists, in the sick way that they do, experiment on helpless animals and torture them to find out things along these lines. Well, just imagine what came before us being involved in all those trials, and then eventually we came out of it, right? I'm not saying that's what it is, but you can kind of get the idea of something being injected with these viruses And because we would be on a different time scale than what was doing this to us, they would be able to very rapidly view the progress of those experiments and eventually create us, or whatever this thing is I'm in speaking to you from, right? Is it a human being, I guess? Okay. Hopefully I explained that in a way that makes it understandable, at least as far as I'm interpreting it. I mean, again, I don't know what I'm talking about, but it sure seems like that's what they're saying here. These endogenous retroviruses are literally designed to embed into your chromosomes that you pass on to future generations. What better way would there be to alter something's biology than to create something like that? And I guess that's where you get into the territory of, well, hey, is this something that was naturally created by God as a way to drive evolution? I mean, it could be. And then maybe there's a different class of viruses that are also a form of nanotechnology that they replicated, like HIV, for example, that they used as a bioweapon, and all the other bioweapons along those lines. And use your imagination in the same way you could create any of the ancient predators that you introduce into the food system in a similar way to try to create this brutal ecosystem where life consumes life. Maybe it wasn't always that way, and viruses were how they altered biology. But this particular article is going into how, well, they used to just think they were dormant and didn't do anything, and now they're seeing how it actually protects against certain other viruses. And I'll just read a little bit of that before going forward. In the new study, researchers led by Edward Chuang, a computational biologist at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, explored whether ERVs help us fend off invaders. They focused on the innate immune system, a first line of defense. While the adaptive immune system learns to recognize specific invaders and mount responses against them, the innate system is pre-programmed to launch immediate attacks against entire classes of foreigners. So in many ways, the innate immune system sounds a lot like morphic resonance, right? Where it's this collective, generational history that's passed on from one being to the next. In essence, a library of everything that we've been exposed to along those lines, to the point where if we are exposed to it again, immediately we know how to deal with that because it's something that we overcame evolutionarily speaking. In that way, it's a type of communication like morphic resonance is. It's just on a different scale. We're talking about the innate immune system as opposed to the communication system that would produce the 100th monkey effect. And obviously, if you wanted to alter something with the innate immune system, that would affect maybe how long we live, and other aspects of longevity, how soon we break down, if you put the right sequence into the chromosomes that were being passed down. And that's kind of the angle that they're not getting into in the article. They're just focusing on the idea of, hey, these ERVs in the innate immune system are possibly doing something beneficial for us. And not only that, when we do our various tests with it, when we remove it via CRISPR, take that sequence out, and then we expose it to a certain virus, we see that we don't get the immune response that we normally get. And so, hey, maybe these things in the innate immune system, these ERVs that we once thought were dormant fossils, maybe they're actually doing something. And see, they don't go to the other end of that thought experiment, which is, well, if they're doing something, maybe they're not fossils at all. Yes, they're doing what you are saying they're doing, but maybe they're doing something else too that you're not seeing. And that's the point of doing a video like this. Because there are articles like this, endogenous retroviruses make aging go viral. Endogenous retroviruses originate from integrated exogenous retroviruses and become part of the host genome during evolution. It now seems that they are hallmarks of aging and responsible for the spreading of cellular senescence in human. That was an interesting sentence. Aged tissues often contain senescent cells, which no longer have the ability to properly function and proliferate. If senescent cells resist clearance and linger in tissues, they produce senescence-associated secretory phenotype, SASP, factors that spread inflammation and damage to other cells. However, other drivers of the spread of senescence remain obscure. In a recent issue of Cell, the researchers discover ERV as a key driver of cellular senescence and tissue aging. And just to look this up like I had to, what is cellular senescence? Senescent cells are unique in that they eventually stop multiplying but don't die off when they should. They instead remain and continue to release chemicals that can trigger inflammation. So in short, we have these aging tissues that contain these senescent cells that helps promote degradation in the body. It helps promote aging. And that's what I was getting at when I was relating it to this Is Aging a Disease video. Well, now we kind of have a basis to assert the idea that yes, this evidence of ERVs, these endogenous retroviruses, are in fact contributing to aging, as I understand it at least. Maybe I'm way off base on that, but based on what I'm picking up from all of this, we can absolutely say that now. Especially if we go with the underlying thesis that ERVs and viruses in general is a form of biological nanotechnology that was from its inception designed to do a few specific things or whatever they wanted to do. And you could put those viruses into the chromosomes to be passed on in a way that it would produce this cellular senescent effect and prematurely age a being if you didn't want it to live past a certain point. Now, I don't know why anybody would want to do that, but again, like I said in the original video, I mean, that could be God helping us. Putting that idea in someone's head to do that, or putting it in the environment for that to happen, to help us not have to be in this environment longer than we need to be. Just as much as it could be the opposite, where it's whatever is in control here doing that to intentionally shorten our lives so we don't have the time to ever figure out what's actually going on and do anything about it collectively. And you could just as easily apply that ERV idea, altering the chromosomes to express something different to eventually affect the way the body is constructed and functioning. You could do the same thing to our internal stomach apparatus and say, oh, hey, well, we want the human beings that we're creating here to be the apex predator in the third dimension. And to be that, they need to be in the food chain where life consumes life. So we don't want them to be able to produce their own B12 and absorb it in a way where they would not need to obtain it from their diet. Because if we didn't need to obtain B12 from our diet, specifically from meats, our bodies would be able to regenerate and function perfectly without needing to kill any animals whatsoever. And planet Earth would be a whole lot different if we were in that situation, don't you think? Because the violence of that is everywhere in society. It extends from it, and we don't even recognize it because it's normalized. Indeed, that's why the whole fake vegan movement is out there and promoted by all the usual suspects, because they seize on that sentiment that everybody knows should be true, and they say, oh, this is the answer. But then they leave out the part where it's like, oh no, if you do that, you might kill yourself, actually, if you don't supplement perfectly. And even if you supplement perfectly, you're really going to deteriorate your body over time if you don't eat this thing that you need because you don't produce it on your own. But the reason people are conned into it, like myself, I got into it on the vegetarian end of the spectrum. You're conned into it because you can just feel that something isn't right about it. Especially with the way that we do it, where we have no connection to the animal in any way, shape, or form. At least 400 or 500 years ago, you would have actually had to go out in the world and do it yourself, and that would give you a whole different perspective on the thing that was taking place, and you wouldn't waste any of the animal, and you would be very grateful in a way that no one is grateful when they sit down and eat the meat that they bought at the grocery store. Anyways, getting a little sidetracked here. This is endogenous retroviruses in human evolution. Humans share about 99% of their genomic DNA with chimpanzees and bonobos. Thus, the differences between these species are unlikely to be in gene content, but could be caused by inherited changes in regulatory systems. Endogenous retroviruses comprise around 5% of the human genome. The LTRs of ERVs, what is an LTR of an ERV? I don't know what the LTR acronym stands for, unfortunately. But ERVs are the endogenous retroviruses. They contain many regulatory sequences such as promoters, enhancers, polyadenylation signals, and factor binding sites. Thus, they can influence the expression of nearby human genes. All known human-specific LTRs belong to the HERV-K human ERV family, the most active family in the human genome. It is likely that some of these ERVs could have integrated into regulatory regions of the human genome and therefore could have had an impact on the expression of adjacent genes, which have consequently contributed to human evolution. This review discusses possible functional consequences of ERV integration in active coding regions. So that's the important sentence, the one before, where it says it is likely that some of these ERVs could have integrated into regulatory regions of the human genome and therefore could have had an impact on the expression of adjacent genes, which have consequently contributed to human evolution. And that's their way of saying maybe this could be going on, and if it maybe is going on and we put it in the context of viruses being nanotechnology, okay, maybe we have these ERVs that's a form of biological nanotechnology distributed with intent that is altering human evolution. I mean, there it is, right? I might be making it up. I don't know. Again, I don't know what I'm talking about. But it sure seems like that is the conclusion that we can tentatively reach as it relates to a hypothesis potentially emerging here. And then, as I already went into, when you add the dot that is cellular senescence and connect that to aging, then you really get at this interesting picture of what could have transpired in the past with evolution, the human brain, and now aging tying into that as well. It's funny along those lines, right? The whole contrived debate over whether or not COVID was a lab leak or not. Well, if we place that debate in this context, it becomes laughable, right? I mean, if this is the source of our evolution and everything that we see expressed in our bodies, viruses that is, which are intentional in design, yeah, pretty sure that one came from a lab too. So it just shows you how far behind we are. It shows you why we don't know anything, because we are so far behind that which is in control here. And the more I think of it, they probably have to extend great patience just to get hyped up enough to actually lie to us. Can you imagine? It would be like conning a bunch of children or something in our world. Well, I guess we do that, right? It would be like them, or it would be like their version of Santa Claus, where they get all hyped up to lie to the kids. And they create this whole elaborate thing that makes it fun for them to lie to these kids and convince them that there's this whole grand thing going on where this man's going to come down a chimney and deliver presents to them on this day. Maybe that's what they do. Maybe that's what all the rituals are for, where they get hyped up for these holidays where they lie to us every year. I don't know. Just spitballing here, but I actually am going to attach what Adam Pants said along these lines to the end of this, so you can hear it from someone much smarter than I and much more connected to life than I explain it. But hopefully I did a decent job of getting into how this article is connected to these old videos in the sense of, hey, what they're saying here could really support what was in these two videos and expand the view. The most important takeaway here is that the endogenous retroviruses, or ERVs are not able to produce new viruses. And because of that, scientists originally assumed that they were harmless genetic fossils. But in this context, we can see how, yeah, they're not designed to produce new viruses. No, they were viruses that were designed to affect the actual chromosomes, to affect evolution. That was the intent all along. It's just we only see it in its manifested form after the chromosomes have grown into a human being, and we say, well, these are dormant. They're not doing anything. They don't produce anything. And it's kind of like, oh no, you're not looking at it correctly. They did their job. It was just in the prior person before they had their child. That's when the job was done. And this science article kind of explores that possibility, but they do it from the opposite angle where they're saying, oh, well, hey, if we take out what we view as these dormant ERVs, and then we expose this virus to those cells, they don't react like they used to and they get attacked, and it's a bad thing. So maybe these endogenous retroviruses are actually helping our immunity, or the innate immune system as they went into explaining. But see the big picture here, at least potentially as it relates to viruses being nanotechnology and being viewed as dormant DNA fossils after the job is done, before procreation. If you view it in this context, oh, well, now I understand what it was doing in the person prior, and I understand why it's dormant now, which is something that scientists haven't been able to explain. But if you put it in this context, all of a sudden it starts to make a lot of sense. I'm not saying that's what it is, but this is certainly a viable hypothesis, and I think any PhD would agree with me on that. So that's it for now. Later.
What's scarlet fever? Well, you have a certain type of bacteria called Streptococcus pyogenes, and it's normal flora inside of you. But sometimes if your bacterial flora goes out of balance, or other things that happen that decrease its competition for nutrients, it can overgrow, it can flourish, it can become infective, because now it's out competing everything and it's growing too much. And then you get strep throat. You don't always have to contract strep throat from somebody else. It's in you already. But it's not that bacteria that gives you scarlet fever. So how do you get scarlet fever? Well, that's when a virus infects the bacteria. And when a virus infects the bacteria, they call it a phage. All right, that's the name for a virus that infects a bacteria. And what happens? The virus inserts its DNA, and then the enzymes in the bacteria read that DNA, and it transcribes a new genetic sequence, which is spliced into the bacteria's DNA, into its genetic code, and inserted into the bacteria's genetic code. And this new gene sequence transcribes a protein toxin, a poison that affects you. It's no longer the same strain of bacteria. What do you think they've been doing with you over time? You hear about this, right? Even in religion, the corruption of DNA. Well, how do you think they did that? Other than viruses. A virus isn't alive, people. It's non-metabolizing. And look at it. I mean, either it's single-stranded or double-stranded RNA or DNA, and it just happens to have the perfect vector for infection, a protein capsid that just bonds to the cell receptor, and then it penetrates and injects its genetic material. And it's like a program, because a virus can't hurt you by itself. It can't reproduce by itself. It's not alive. Your enzymes have to read it and create what it tells you to create. If they don't do that, it can't hurt you. It's nanotechnology. See, a microbiology student would be like, well, our professor says that viruses come from the rainforest often because it has a similar temperature to a human's body temperature. Yeah, okay. Come on, people, it's technology, all right? There's no reason for a virus to exist in nature. Think about it. What are the odds of that? That you'd have the correct codons to be a viable fragment of DNA or RNA, and a delivery vector, protein capsid around it? Come on. And look at HIV. With AIDS, In your immune system, it'd be good to talk about the immune system right now because that kind of goes along with what's going on Earth. For your white blood cells, anyway, you have a system. You have different types of white blood cells. You've got your polymorphonucleocytes. Most of you don't care about this, but in case there's those physiology students out there that need to hear the technical stuff because I'm talking about the spirit and I won't be qualified to you unless I know what you know. Yes, I know what those are, the eosinophils, basophils, neutrophils, okay, and then you've got your monomorphs, and those are the T and Bs, and the monocytes, which you call a macrophage when it's in the body because it's mobile. The macrophage is kind of like the cop, all right? It's always going around your body sampling stuff, looking for anything that it would consider to be an antigen or something that it sees as foreign to the body. So if it finds something like a bacteria that's foreign, that's infective, it will engulf it. That's why they call it a phagocytical cell, P-H-A-G-O. Phag means to engulf, to eat. Cyte means, well, cell. So it's a phagocyte. And so it will engulf it and then display its material, the contents of the bacteria, on its cell wall. Then it takes a little trip into, say, a lymph node. There you have many white blood cells already there. In fact, you're born with, I guess, up to like 500,000 different types of combinations already there to handle infections. Like you're already pre-programmed to fight off up to 500,000 different potential infecting agents, right? But it's very generic, so if something new comes into your body, what happens is this macrophage will go in there and say, hey, look what I got. Of course, no, it's not speaking English, all right? I'm just being metaphorical. It goes in there and says, look, anybody here know what this is? Anybody, can you handle it? And it's not just what scientists tell you. It's not just show and tell. All right, this happens in different dimensions as well. Do you know your body communicates not only in the third dimension? You have many different types of communication. Many different paths of communication, not just hormonal, not just neurological. Consciousness, and that consciousness is not limited to the third dimension, nor is the immune system. But anyway, so eventually maybe this macrophage encounters a white blood cell that says, hey, wait, I kind of have something that can deal with that. That's pretty similar to how I'm made. Here, just give me a moment. Let me change a few things up. They call this genetic recombination. So it changes its genetic sequencing a little bit so that it can effectively go after the infection. Once it's done, and once it's changed itself to be correct, and so that it can handle it, and it divides and puts clones of itself dormant. They call those memory cells, and that's your immunity, in case that pathogen comes back to the body again. So you don't have to go through this whole process. But when it's identified and says, okay, I'm the one to take care of it, then it will turn on a receptor on its cell wall, and all the other ones will turn their receptors off. And this is a receptor to a substance called interleukin-2. Inter means between, leukin means white blood cell. It's a hormone secreted by your helper cells. And what this hormone does is it causes rapid cell division. They divide fast. I mean, your lymph nodes will literally become packed wall to wall with white blood cells. This is why a doctor will feel your lymph nodes, right? If they're swollen, that means that your immune system is trying to fight something off. HIV goes after the helper cells, the one that secretes interleukin-2. So without that, you don't get the rapid cell division. Yeah, I'm sure that just happened to show up in the rainforest somewhere as a freak of nature. No, man. Viruses are nanotechnology.